Hi everyone! Good morning or afternoon or evening or whatever part of the day there is in your location, in your part of the world, and welcome to part 10 of the basic tutorial series on Eurofly 3. Oh wow, it's such a nice round number already, and to think that we still have 7 more to go after this one. Okay, now that we've been talking about the plane properties and how to steer the plane and how to use all the various navigation systems, let's now talk about something that brings together or connects the pilot in the cockpit, so to speak, to the rest of the world. And that is the radios and the control towers. So let's go into free flights again.
Free flight dialog. Beechcraft Cessna C-152. Brno/Turini.
And I'm going to choose my own personal Cessna C-152 here, which I have located at a small Category 1 airport in Brno, that is the second largest town of the Czech Republic. But the exact airport location is not important for this tutorial. What is important is that I know this place, and I know for sure that all the types of frequencies that I want to be showing you are nearby. Since the radio is the same in every kind of plane, in every category of plane, Category 1 and 2 and 3, it doesn't really matter which plane and which airport we choose for this tutorial here.
Europe check. Dashboard window.
But before I actually turn the radio on, let's talk a bit about how the radios and towers work in principle in Eurofly 3. First of all, we need to realize that every airport has its own control tower, at least one of them, or it may have 2 of them. The ground control, which is used obviously to control the planes that are currently moving on the ground, that are taxiing, that are about to move to a gate or to a stand to board passengers, or that are taxiing into the hangar or towards their takeoff runway, etc. Or the approach control, which controls planes that are approaching the airport from the air from flight and are about to land on it. And also that each control tower has its own specific range, which can be different for all of them. The range doesn't just mean that we can communicate with the control tower within this distance, but it especially means, or more importantly, it means that within this range we are under that control tower's actual control, that we're supposed to be following its instructions. That's why we talk about these areas as the so-called controlled areas for the given airport. So if the given airport, in my case the small airport in Brno where I'm right now, has its range of 20 kilometers all around in all directions, then that means that the 20 kilometers around this airport is the controlled area of the given airport, and if we are located within this area, we are under the command and are supposed to be following the instructions of that airport's control towers. It's because obviously the dispatcher or controller is responsible for the safety around their airport, and the pilot cannot just simply wander into the area of that airport and do anything they wish to do in there. So if we are currently located in the Brno airport, there can be more of these controlled areas at once around us. There could be another airport whose range overlaps with this airport in Brno and vice versa, and that's why it's important to know this and to realize this, because depending on which radio frequency we connect to, and also depending on which airport's controlled area we are currently in, that determines who we'll be actually talking to. So to be able to know where we are and what's around us, there are the keys 8 and 9 on the numbers row in the standard English keyboard layout, in the QWERTY layout, without pressing Shift, just the 8 and 9 keys on their own. They're the keys above the letter U is 8 and above the letter I is 9. And when we press them,
Airport Brno/Turini.
The 8 key has told us Airport Brno. The word airport is particularly important here in this case, because when we hear that word, that means that we're currently on the ground at that airport. If we're currently flying and we were near the airport, instead of the word airport, we would be hearing controlled area, Brno, Turani. So if we were currently in an area where there are multiple smaller airports close to each other, the 8 key always tells us which one is currently the nearest to us. And if we were, for instance, flying low above the ground, because remember that we can actually fly over the airport area physically in Eurofly 3. We see the airport beneath us. So the 8 key will always tell us which airport's controlled area we are currently flying over. Imagine that you're headed for Paris or Berlin or London or any other large capital like that, and you're about to land, but in your direction, before reaching that destination airport, there's a smaller airport still. Before you reach your destination airport, there's a smaller one. And if you're already going low above ground, you can easily find yourself flying over that smaller airport. You can see it because it's right below you. The pilot would be able to say it out of the window in real life, so to speak. But it is not your destination airport. It is not the one where you're actually supposed to land. That's why we can't just rely on the program, announcing, or the plane announcing the word airport. And as soon as we hear the word airport, we go for the landing, because it may not be the airport that you're actually going for. So the 8 key always tells you which airport it is that you're currently flying above. And if it is not your airport, you just don't land and you keep flying. So when we need to know which airport it is that is actually below us right now, or which airport's controlled area it is that we're actually located in right now, use the 8 key. The 9 key tells us what are all the available airports within range around us and how we can contact them. So it tells us their frequencies. Before actually pressing this key, though, I'm still going to mention one more thing, that except for the airports themselves, there are also the air traffic controls or national air traffic controls in Eurofly 3. Because in practice, it's only the airports that are guiding the planes within their controlled area premises. That means that if you're about to take off here at the Brno airport or anywhere else, the controller at that airport, it's their duty to safely guide you out of the area of that airport, but they just don't care about you from that point on. When you leave the airport and its airspace, that airport's controller is not concerned with the rest of your flight or with the rest of your trip anymore. And they only talk to those who are taking off from that airport or are approaching it and are about to land there. That means that when you leave the Brno airport, in this case, it's no longer any good to stay in touch, to stay tuned to that airport's frequency for you. In practice, it usually works in such a way that as soon as you reach a certain safe height, which is usually 2 kilometers above ground, you'll be taken over by the National Air Traffic Control. Imagine the air traffic control as the kind of dispatcher who controls and dispatches all the traffic in the area of that particular country. So that controller is the one who cares about where you're going, which way you're headed. And so if you're headed from Brno to Vienna in Austria, for example, they're going to be the one to tell you to change your course slightly southwards or eastwards or westwards, etc., as needed. So that is the person who's concerned with the altitude and course of your flight. So if you were doing, say, a domestic flight and you were headed for Prague, which is the capital of the Czech Republic, that dispatcher, the National Air Traffic Controller, would be guiding you in order to reach Prague. And as soon as you are close enough to the Prague airport, they would tell you to switch your frequency to the Prague airport, and the approach control would then take you over from there. They would be the ones to tell you where to land, which runway to land on, whether you can land at the moment, and so on. But during the flight between Brno and Prague, you'll be handled by this National Air Traffic Control. But if you were doing an international flight, as soon as you were about to cross the country borders, or a little while before that or a little while after that, you would be told by that current national air traffic control that you're currently talking to switch your frequency to the other national air traffic control, depending on where it was that you were actually going. So in the case of Vienna, they would tell you to switch to the Austrian national air traffic control. So each country has its own national air traffic control. In real life, there could be multiple national air traffic controls, even for a single country. But in Eurofly 3, there's always just one national air traffic control per country. So now that I've explained the basic concepts, let's press the 9 key now and let's learn about what are all the possible airports and radio frequencies around us that we can contact.
Combo box Brno/Turini ground control 119,6 collapsed.
So we heard that it's a combo box. That means that we'll be moving with the arrow keys, and there's the ground control for the Brno-Turini airport where we're currently at right here. Since we're currently on the ground control of the airport where we're currently standing would be the first radio frequency that we would need to switch to in order to be given instructions for takeoff.
Brno/Turini approach control 127,4.
There's the approach control for this airport. We would be using that right before takeoff, as soon as we've been assigned a runway and are about to take off, or if we were coming in at this airport and we're about to land here.
Medlanki approach control 122,4.
There's the approach control for another small airport very close by, actually still in Brno, still in this city.
Air traffic control Czech Republic 311,9.
And there's the air traffic control for the Czech Republic. And that's it. That's all of them. So if we wanted to, we could actually contact the air traffic control for the Czech Republic even now, right now, while we're still standing on the ground at the airport. But in practice, this would do us no good because planes that are on the ground do not concern the national air traffic control. But let's now connect to the airport where we are actually at the moment.
Brno/Turini ground control 119,6.
119.6. So first of all, before I can even turn the radio,
Dashboard window.
I pressed escape. I'm going to need to turn on the battery first of all, the power supply. So Control-Shift-B. Now Control-Shift-F to turn on the radio itself.
Radio on.
We hear that it's just producing static noise. We're not tuned to any frequency. Alt-F.
Set frequency. Set frequency edit
Then
lane.
let's type it in. 119.6. Enter.
Brno/Turini ground control.
686. We welcome you to our airport. And we heard that the tower has welcomed us, and we could actually start talking to it right now if we wanted to. We also heard the program or the screen reader announcing the name of the control that we just tuned to. We can repeat that at any time with the F key by itself.
119,6 Brno/Turini ground control.
So how do we talk to the tower? We do that using the F1 key, which brings up a window containing all the possible requests that we could make to the control tower at the time. And this window always contains two elements. The list box with all the possible requests, where we can just select one with the arrow keys and press enter on it to select it, to make it, or an edit field that we can get to by pressing tab, and where we could type in the request that we would actually like to make in the form of a predetermined given keyword for the request. In the main menu of the program on the settings screen on the flight tab, there is an option that determines which way of contacting the control tower you prefer the most, whether it is selecting from the list of all the possible requests to make, or whether it is typing the keywords for the requests, whichever you find more convenient for yourself. Depending on the state of this option, when you bring up this window to talk to the tower with the F1 key, you will always either start in the list to choose the request from, or in the edit field where you can type it. The window will still always contain both the elements, the list box as well as the edit field, but the difference is where in the window you are going to start after pressing the F1 key. So depending on your preference, it's always going to save you that one extra press of the tab key. So let's press F1 now.
Combo box plan. I want to create a flight plan collapse.
My preference is the list, so that's where I started. And we can immediately see
Plan. I want to create a flight plan.
that this is the first command, the first request we can make. The plan is the keyword for it, and the I want to create a flight plan part is its meaning, its content, what this request does. So if we chose this, we would tell the tower that we were about to create our flight plan for this upcoming flight. But I'll be talking about the flight plans in the next part of the tutorial, because the flight plans are a separate chapter in its own right. Let's take a look at the other requests here that we can make at this moment.
Repair. I need repairs.
This would mean that we need to have our plane repaired after, say, crashing into a building at the airport or something, so that the control tower would then dispatch the maintenance vehicle for us.
Runway. Asking for runway assignment.
We can ask the control tower to assign us a takeoff runway.
Repair. Plan.
And at the very moment, these are actually all the requests that we could be making to the ground control tower for the Brno airport at this time, at this very moment, because this menu of requests for the control tower is always contextual. For instance, you can't ask for the refueler with such a small plane like the Cessna C-152 is, where you always refuel manually, as I was demonstrating in the earlier parts of the series. Or you can't ask to board passengers in a two-seater. By the same logic, you can't ask to be assigned a gate or stand with this plane, because you're not supposed to be doing any boarding. That's why we can't see the other requests here. But if we were flying something larger, like a Boeing or an Airbus plane, obviously we would be seeing all these different requests here. Likewise, if we're currently connected to the approach control, there would be requests here for them to assign us a landing runway, or to ask for the approach clearance, or for the landing clearance, or to abort our current landing. If we were currently connected to the air traffic control, to the national air traffic control, we could ask them for permission to change our altitude or our course, but not to land, because they're not an airport. They're the traffic control for flights for while you're airborne. So obviously the National Air Traffic Control is not going to be the one who would assign you a landing runway. So if I wanted to type instead, I could just press tab,
Edit blank.
and I could type in, let's say, plan in here and press enter.
Combo box plan. I want to create a flight plan collapse.
Or I could just press enter on this request here in the list. So let's ask the tower to assign us a takeoff runway right now, just to see what happens.
Dashboard window.
SK686, we do not have your flight plan. And you'll see that the control tower would not give us a runway because they don't know yet where we're going to fly, where we'll be headed. So I'll be talking about how to create the flight plan in the next part. But what I'm going to talk about now is that we could easily just switch our frequency to a completely different airport at the moment. If I press F, as I was saying before,
119,6 Brno/Turini ground control.
we hear what frequency we're currently tuned to, but also which airport it is that we're currently talking to. So let's try to contact a different airport now.
Combo box Brno/Turini approach Medlanki approach control 122,4.
Let's contact the other Brno airport. I found this out with the 9 key.
Dashboard.
So let's press Alt
Set
F and type in 122.4.
Medlanki approach control. Dashboard window.
Now F tells us that frequency
122,4 Medlanki approach control.
and that we are currently connected to the other Category 1 airport in Brno. But this is not our airport. This is not the one where we're currently located. But if there was any communication going on here at the moment, if there were other pilots talking to the same control tower at the same time as we do, obviously we would be able to hear them, because we do hear all the other pilots and all the other communication that's happening on the same frequency that we are tuned to. But let's try to ask even this tower for something at the moment. Press F1.
Combo box enter. Asking for permission to enter the runway collapsed.
You see this is a...
Plan. I want to create a flight plan. Repair. I need repairs. Runway. Asking for runway assignment. Takeoff. Asking for takeoff clearance.
There are a few more requests here. And let's try to ask them for takeoff clearance.
Dashboard window.
SK686, you're not located in our controlled area. So you see that the airport has just denied us because we're not their client, so to speak, and we are not in the air approaching them either. So they're not going to be talking to us, and they won't let us take off from an airport where we're not even at. But if we did take off here and approach that other Brno airport, and we asked them only then to give us a landing runway, then obviously they would comply and they would assign us a landing runway, because then we would already be located in their controlled area. It works the same way even with the national air traffic controls. Obviously, when we're in the Czech Republic and if we were close to the borders, we could reach the national air traffic control for Germany or Austria, for example. But if we're not headed there and we have nothing to do with them, they would not be giving us any commands or instructions. So this is how we talk to the control tower, and this is also how we find out where we are currently and who we can reach from here. It's good to keep track of this, but of course the control tower or the national air traffic control will also tell us to switch to a different frequency as needed. Of course, not all the flights are monitored by the national air traffic control. If we're going from one airport to Brno to another airport in Brno, which is about 10 kilometers apart, obviously the national air traffic control for the Czech Republic would not be concerned about this, would not be interested in the slightest. Or if we were doing a flight that was just 50 or 60 kilometers long. Just any domestic flight overall. In that case, the flight usually occurs at lower altitudes as well, so we will not be supposed and expected to climb as high. But we could, in this case, we could tune our radio to the frequency of our destination airport, even at the very beginning, as soon as we take off from our starting airport. But obviously, until we get within range of that destination airport, even if we're already tuned to its frequency, it would not be giving us any instructions because we're not in its range yet. But as soon as we do get within its range, they'll start talking to us and we'll be able to see that it's the destination airport that we're actually interested in under the F key. So, for instance, let's switch to a completely different frequency here. Control F8 to bring up the list of the available
Filter
airports. Let's type in
Combo box Czech Republic Prague / Letniny, LKLT, Czech Republic Prague, Václav Havel.
Yeah, let's tune to the main Prague airport.
Czech Republic Prague, Václav Havel, LKPR, 202 kilometers 58.
Which is 202 kilometers away. Let's press Shift Enter on this to bring up its properties for that airport.
Combo box pilot Lucas Haas, approach control 120,5.
120.5. So let's press Alt
Set
F.
frequency
120.5.
120,5. Dashboard window.
But we heard that we didn't hear anything. And even if we press the F key,
120,5.
there's gonna be no airport name listed after the number because we are tuned to a different frequency. That airport is currently so far from us and there's no one else nearby at the moment who would be communicating at this frequency at 120.5. But if we took off from here now and kept our radio tuned to this frequency and we did fly on course for the main Prague airport, they would start talking to us as soon as we get within range, and we would be able to see that airport under the F key as soon as we were within 20 kilometers of it. Well, actually, in this case, it would be 50 kilometers away from it because the main Prague airport is category 3. It's a larger airport, so it has a more powerful radio, and thus it has a more powerful range. But actually, you can also set the ranges for all the categories of airports separately, for airports of category 1, category 2, and category 3 in the settings on the flight tab. So you can also customize how far you want to be able to contact the different category airports from, or how much time in advance, essentially. Of course, we need to switch our radio all the time during our flight as needed. So if we were to take off here, because this is a larger airport that has both ground control and approach control. So we would first need to connect to ground control for them to assign us the takeoff runway and to give us takeoff clearance. Then after taking off, we may have to switch to the national air traffic control, depending on how long the flight is and whether it is domestic or international. If it was a really long international flight, we might even need to switch to multiple different national air traffic controls one after another as we were crossing the borders of each country. Then, as we were approaching our destination airport and got within range, we would have to switch to their approach control. Because we are approaching it, we need to land on it. So that approach control would assign us the runway to land on and give us the landing clearance. But then, if it was also a larger airport with both the approach control and the ground control, then we would at last also need to switch to its ground control. Because the approach control tells us where to land, but it's not concerned with the details like, for instance, which gate we need to stop at to onboard passengers and which taxiways we need to use to reach that particular gate. So working with the radio is an active task in Eurofly 3 and a conscious one, and we always need to be able to work with that and to know what we're doing and who we need to talk to at each point in order to be able to actually receive the instructions and guidance from the control towers. It's actually a good idea to listen to these instructions then, because in Eurofly 3 there are also the gates and the stands, runway assignments in real time to all the pilots. That means that if the control tower tells us to go to gate 3, for example, then it's a good idea to actually go to gate 3, because there could be someone else, some other player actually standing in gate 1 or in gate 2 at the same moment, and we could crash into them. The same goes for the flight altitude and course. For instance, if there were many pilots flying around the same airport at the same time, then the control tower gives us such instructions so that our flight is safe. So working with the radio in Eurofly 3 is no longer just a cosmetic matter, and I believe that if you become familiar with how to work with the radio, it's going to make your flight all the more pleasant.